Next, we'll cover the final nodes of this other section. First up is the sleep node. This node acts as a pause in your script or module. When the script reaches this point, it will pause for a few seconds, depending on the time you set, before moving on to the next step. Here, you can set a fixed time for the sleep node. You can set the duration to 10 seconds or 100 seconds, as you prefer. Or, you can set the sleep time to be random, which helps avoid detection by platforms or apps during automation. For example, you can set it to randomize between 1 second and 10 seconds, or between 1 second and 20 seconds, depending on your needs. This way, it will run for a variable time. Each time it reaches this point, it will have a different pause duration. This helps you avoid being detected by platforms. Additionally, I'll briefly discuss the settings within these nodes. Almost all nodes have similar settings, which include two main time-related options. First is sleep time, which is similar to the sleep node itself. However, in some cases, even though it has a sleep time, the node might still trigger, which is why an external sleep node is necessary to separate the timing completely from the functional node. This node only has a duration and no specific function. The sleep time refers to the waiting period before when it reaches this function. It will wait for about 5 seconds. For example, if I set it to 5 seconds, it will wait for 5 seconds before executing the action in the node. For example, in a press home node, it will press the home button 5 seconds after reaching this point. Another option is timeout. Timeout refers to the duration the node has to complete its action. For example, this timeout setting is often used with the text input node. The text input node is used for entering text. However, for longer text, say up to 1,000 characters, you need to set the timeout. If you only set it to 10 seconds, it won't be enough time. In such cases, you should increase the timeout to 30 seconds. This gives the node 30 seconds to type out all the characters as naturally as possible. And Control+V, copy-paste. Instead, it will type as a person would. It will take time to type each character. In this case, you need to increase the timeout for longer text. Timeout here is similar to the timeout for the node's duration. For example, another common use of timeout is with the element exists node. These two timeouts are different. Note that the timeout in the options and the timeout in the element exists node settings are different. This timeout is the waiting period for this path to appear, whereas the timeout here is the duration the node is active. All the timeouts in the settings section refer to the duration the node runs. A node runs for a set amount of time, which you specify here. The timeout on the left side in the view options is the waiting time for this path to appear. For example, even if this path appears, if I set the waiting time to 10 seconds, but the timeout for that node is only 5 seconds, there may be a situation where after 5 seconds, the node's running time is up. It will output the node's result. Whether it's success or fail depends on how you set it here. It won't wait the full 10 seconds for this path to appear. Instead, it will immediately report fail because the node's runtime has ended. The node has exceeded its running time. So, pay attention to ensure the timeout on the left side in the options section is always shorter than the timeout on the right side to allow the search time to run correctly as set. These are the 2 points about the settings I wanted to highlight. The sleep time is the waiting time before the node runs. Timeout is the time the node remains active. After this period, the node will stop running and exit through one of 2 paths. It will exit through the red path or the green path based on success or failure. That's sleep. Alright, next is a very important node. It's important and used in almost every script you create. This is the loop node. Loop means repetition. It will repeat your actions, so you don't have to create too many nodes manually. It will repeat them for you. Regarding the loop and loop v2 nodes, they function similarly. The only difference lies in how you set up the output nodes. So, let's talk about the loop node first. Okay, the loop node is a basic node. It has one green input, one green output, and one red output. The difference from other nodes is that it has two orange outputs. These two orange outputs mark the nodes that perform repetitive actions. For example, I have 3 nodes here. They will form a sequence. To repeat the actions of these 3 nodes for a certain number of times, you'll connect the yellow wires to the start and end of the sequence you want to repeat. Now, let me describe the flow. When the script reaches this point, it will start from a node and enter the green input of the loop node. It will begin checking the loop condition. If the condition is met, it will loop through the yellow wire and enter the second yellow input. Then, it will check the loop condition again. If the condition is still met, it will continue looping. It will keep looping. When it reaches this point, and the loop condition is no longer met, it will exit through the green wire, indicating that it completed successfully. That's the basic loop. So, what is the loop condition? Let me explain. A loop is a repetition, and there are 2 types of loops. First, there's a for loop and a while loop. A for loop runs from one number to a specified number. For example, it runs for the number of times I set it to run, say from 1. For example, it runs from the first value to the 10th value. When it enters here, it counts as 1 iteration. For example, if it runs 10 loops, it will satisfy the condition of running from 1 to 10, and it will exit through the green wire. So, a for loop runs for a specific number of times. It repeats from 1 to 10, for example. It repeats 10 times. The second type is a while loop. A while loop is similar to a condition-based loop. It checks a condition while running. For example, when a variable key has a condition to compare with something else. For example, it checks if the value is less than 3. If the variable key is less than 3, it will perform the loop. So when it runs into this node, it checks if the variable key is indeed less than 3. It will enter and run. Then it will check again if the variable key is still less than 3. If it's less than 3, it will loop again. Now, let me try it with the emission I created yesterday. Emission with cx.bo. I'll use this emission again. I'll open the inspector. I'll select device. Then I'll reload it. Here, I'll crop the image like I did yesterday. I'll click here and crop the image. Got it? Then I'll save it. I'll add it to the emission. There we go. I'll crop the image again. Then I'll save it. I'll add it to the emission. Then I'll save it. When you save an emission, especially if the images contain many details, it may take a while. When you paste it into the input, wait a few moments. It might take 2 to 3 seconds to load the image. It's not lagging. It just needs time to load the image. For the paste wait a minute, you can leave it at the default setting, or adjust it slightly. I'll click on this. Now I'll combine it with a loop. Yesterday, I connected the 2 ends. This time, I'll use a loop. First, I'll use a for loop, setting it from 1 to 10. Now I'll run it. Let's say I've run it successfully. Now, I'll start running it from here. I'll see if it loops 10 times as expected. Here, it just did 1 loop. I'll set it to loop 10 times. There. It's looping from 1 to 10. It will click 10 times. It will perform the emission action 10 times. Now, I'll try the while loop. Before trying the while loop, I'll create a new variable. Name it. Let's call it variable A. Combining variables with loops is quite useful. You might use it with an Excel file. For Excel files, you can use the loop to loop through each cell, from cell 1 to cell 10. You can also use a loop. I'll use the emission action. But now, I won't use a for loop from 1 to 10. I'll use a while loop. When my variable A is less than 11. I'll add it here. Now, my variable A has no value, so I'll set its value to 1. And to combine variables with loops, I'll use the node trial1. After the emission and click, it will perform another action, which is adding to the variable. For example, I'll set variable A to I'll add one to that variable. Each time it loops through, it adds one to variable A. Let me describe the loop again. When variable A is less than 11, it performs the emission action and then adds one to variable A. Variable A initially starts at 1. Now, I'll test this loop to see how it works. There, variable A increments each time it passes through the set variable node, and it stops when variable A increments to a value of 11. It loops back to the loop node. The loop checks if the condition is no longer met. Since A is no longer less than 11, the loop stops. See? The loop stops, and it exits through the green path. The loop exits through the green path. Basic ways to use loops. For loops and while loops. Next, let's talk about loop v2. What about loop v2? Loop v2, in terms of logic and condition, it's similar to loop v1. The only difference is in the setup. Loop v2 helps streamline your script. Because with loop v1, you need a circular node with many connections. Combined with break, it functions like a regular node. You'll place a start and end around a loop segment. In loop v2, it works similarly. The difference is, it has a loop ID. The loop ID identifies the start and end points. You need to copy the loop ID. You copy the loop ID. You can copy it from here, or enter the loop, and you'll see a green loop ID. Click to copy it. Then, paste the loop ID in the break to let it know where the start and end are. Beyond that, aside from this break, you can duplicate it. You might have another flow, for example. Duplicate it and use the loop break. It connects to any loop break, but it must have the same loop ID. Got it? The start and end points are similar to the two yellow points in the circular loop. This yellow is the start, and this is the second yellow point. The for loop and while loop function similarly. Those are two loop nodes. You can choose and use these nodes to make your script look as clean and logical as possible. Okay. The last two nodes of the automation section are the comment and stop nodes. The comment node allows you to leave notes or reminders. For example, if you have a group, and the purpose of these nodes is to log into an account, you can leave a note that says login account. This is a group of nodes for logging into an account. Additionally, you can add other notes, like a checkline node. In the future, GenLogin will develop this node further to allow color coding so you can quickly see the functions at a glance. This comment node lets you leave a note about the function of a group of nodes. This is useful when you're building a complex app, so you know what each section is doing. For example, in the login section, you'll only need to look at the login nodes. In the checkline section, you'll check the nodes for issues. This way, leaving comments helps in identifying what each group does. Also, if you have multiple nodes, for example here, you need to tap multiple times, you'll use the touch node. But each time, you tap in a different position. Now, for example, if you have 5 identical touch nodes and an error occurs, you might not know which node caused the error. You'd have to click on each node, check this path to see what each path does. For example, if this path is for a password you might guess that this node is for tapping on the password. Or if this path says login, you'd guess that this touch node is for tapping on the login button. Now, identify errors more easily while debugging without having to open the app and check each path. There's a feature for all nodes in the notes section. For example, I have the first tap set to open the app here. I'll label it as Open App. The second tap is to click on Login. The third tap is to tap on the phone number field. Now, when you move to a node, it will display the note, so you know immediately that the third touch node is for tapping the phone number field. The second touch node is for tapping the login button. So, when running automation, if an error occurs, you don't need to open the app. Hover over the node just to see which step needs fixing. For example, if it fails at the login step, hover then open over the nodes to find the login step. This saves you a lot of time, right? It's much easier when you have many similar nodes using this method that may contain thousands of nodes. Just hover over the nodes, and you'll know what each node does. If it fails, you can debug and fix it immediately. Got it? That's the comment section. Additionally, there's the stop section. When the stop node simply ends a script, it will stop, and the device will also shut down. A script will have only one start node, the green node, but it can have multiple stop nodes. The device will shut down. When the script reaches any stop node, so you can have multiple flows that end at different stop nodes to stop the script. So that's stop and end. Today, I recommend you add a stop node to the end of your script. Some people might skip adding a stop node because there are no more connections, so it will fail anyway. However, there may be instances where if there's no stop node, the device might not recognize. That's when you need to add a stop node. The script has ended and won't close or shut down. I've completed the tutorial on how to use automation with GenFarmer. These are all the nodes currently provided by GenFarmer. Additional nodes in the future to help you create scripts faster and more efficiently. With more features, we will continue making videos on how to use these. This tutorial covers the foundational knowledge, the basics, on how to set up the logic to create your own scripts. You can be creative and mix nodes in your own way. For advanced functions, such as using advanced scripts or ADB shell commands, you can join our community at GenFarmer Community Group. We can discuss and exchange ideas there. If you've watched this far, we'd appreciate it if you could like, comment, and subscribe to our channel so that we can continue making more videos on how to use automation on mobile with GenFarmer. And goodbye. See you in the next video with GenFarmer. See you in the next video.